of as a very ambitious project. We want to transform Gray Village into something that's more bike ped friendly, increases safety for everybody in town, for motorists, for business owners, for people who use the village, and just make it more of an attractive village center. We think that's going to be good for everybody, including business owners, and that's why we invited you here tonight to talk to you about that. We know from the comprehensive plan that over 70% of Gray voters approved in 2020 that improving the village is a tremendously popular idea. That was a big part of our comp plan. And and we also had in 2022 what's called sort of a planning charrette, which is a fancy name for just a series of planning workshops over a 3-day period that about 200 people participated in one way, shape, or form. And so what we're going to be showing you tonight, and the principal group will, as our consultants, will be sharing some of the work that we've done so far. That's based on a lot on what the what came out of that planning charrette. So where we are, just very quickly with this project, is that we're entering into a cooperative agreement with Maine Department of Transportation. They're our partner in this project. It's going to cost a lot of money. We're not going to have to foot the bill here entirely in Gray. We're going to go after what's called a RAISE grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation. That's a federal agency, and that's going to provide the bulk of the money. Gray only has to come up with 10% of it. And we have that money in savings, a lot of that already. So it's not going to be a situation where we're going to be asking local property taxpayers to foot the bill for this. And the goal of this meeting is really just to share what we've done so far, and get your input into that, hopefully get you excited about this project and help you understand how you can be involved going forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the principal group, and they'll show some slides.
Right. Thanks everyone for spending the evening with us here. Hopefully everyone get food, drink, like it's sort of informal. So if you need to get up and grab something, please do.
Yeah, there's desserts over on the sideboard.
Yeah, they look
really about that. Yeah,
lovely. So my name's Russ Preston again. So we've been working with Gray for a couple of years now, and I think we're really excited about, first off, getting all you in this room together tonight, but also sort of starting this next kind of turn on the planning and really sort of thinking about how the transformation will be implemented. A big part of that is DOT and sort of starting to plan real changes to the streetscape. The other part of that is just thinking holistically about the village. And I like to think about this as sort of a spiral. Like we've kind of gone around once. We sort of, back in 2022, we had a big, sort of town-wide conversation about the village. We're kind of starting that second go around where it's really starting to get into details and individual properties, or sort of feet and inches with DOT on right-of-way design and sidewalk design. And, Ann thought it would be good to sort of engage you all as we start this, because it's very much about what the future of property is in the village center, but also how we might work together to make DOT help us accomplish, really transformational opportunity here in the village. So what we're going to walk you through is a little bit of sort of a background, because how many folks participated in the 2022 effort? So a few folks. So this might be, I think, catching everyone up to speed, and then, kind of level setting in that regard. And then we have a couple activities that, some of you have already started on that wall, to really collectively start to co-create this. And what that means for us is that, we come through Gray a lot, but we're not locals. And I think we need your minds, your thoughts, your daily experiences to help sort of inform this, and really want to sort of bring you all into this planning in a genuine way, so that we can start to think through some of these challenges that we're going to face in the months and in the implementation to come. So first off, I think this is let me make sure. Yeah, here we go. So it's a really exciting project. I think it's also one that is emblematic of a lot of tensions that other towns and communities throughout New England are having with their adjacency to a highway, their sort of 50 years of sort of auto-oriented and sort of, drive-by evolution of the land uses in the village center. And I think what we looked at as sort of the community came to us back in 2022, it was very much a holistic view of how do we, not to say back to the future, but how do we sort of create a village that kids can walk around in, older folks can walk around in, and that people can generally get to know one another within. And, full disclosure, I stopped at the Cumberland Farms quite a bit and sort of drive through. How do we sort of make it a place where people want to spend time and sort of as the heart of your community? So I think as you kind of look at these goals that had kind of synthesized out of all the conversations we had in 2022, it'd be important to sort of reflect on, are these still shared? Are these still the right goals? And I think that's the sort of larger vision that we were really asked to sort of lay the foundation for a year ago, is really sort of, okay, let's pull that out again and say over the last 12, 18 months, has anything changed? And I think as you kind of read these goals, they've been very much guiding the work we've been doing with Ann and Will and others on the team, and also kind of bringing DOT to the table as a partner. So I think, just to kind of click through these, we can talk a little bit more about them. But this last one here, I thought was, kind of a good, what is a New England village? And I think, you look back in time, or you go to some of the other villages around the region, that means certain things for certain people. But it's the idea that, well, when we transform Gray's Village, it needs to feel more so like a place for people and less for places for cars. And I think that's this tension we've been seeing with DOT, and how do we get people through the village, but then how do we make people also feel comfortable parking their car and walking into the coffee shop or the donut shop or one of the other businesses that you all operate there. So this was sort of the process we took the community through back in the summer of 2022. There's been a lot of conversation with DOT since then, and sort of kind of laying the groundwork for that infrastructure project. And just that, that process really started with getting everyone out there and walking around the village center. And I think, if you all haven't done that in a while, I invite you to do that yourselves and just sort of try to look at it with a fresh set of eyes and sort of ask that question. If it wasn't like it was now, what would I change about it? And if it wasn't, what are the things we don't want to change that are really beloved or core to what the Gray Village is? And I think that's some of the questions we might ask you, to kind of mark up on these maps at the end of the meeting here. And people gave us a lot of feedback, both subjective and objective. And we have this great job of trying to listen to all these conversations and synthesize them. And then, so the way we do this is we try to really open this up. So we don't just take notes at a meeting like this and then go back to the studio for 3 months, then come back and present it. We kind of set up a temporary studio in town hall, and people could come in from 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. and just see us working. And we kind of, so at the sort of halfway point, we just stopped and put everything up on the wall and said, okay, here's where we're at, just sort of all the ideas and everything. And we find that we have that transparency and that openness, and people can come to this with a really open mind about, okay, let's problem solving rather than just reacting to an idea we're presenting, which I realize I'm doing with you all tonight. So please keep an open mind. This is sort of coming from a lot of discussion with the community already. But, this is important for us. So you can see here the lots of red and green. So your other community members have taken this visual preference survey already, and we thought it was worth doing again, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. And, you can start to see just on the wall here, some patterns kind of emerging. And there is some, whether we like it or not, consensus around what we want things to look like and not look like. And I think as the sort of professionals on the team, now it's like, how do we look at whether it's a street design with DOT or whether it's regulations around redevelopment or all the other tools, do we sort of end up getting better towards the preferences you like and make sure we don't end up, and looking at the one apartment building that no one likes, that that's not what ends up happening, which I fear is happening in more towns and communities around the region than we care to admit. So this also is about visualizing the future, and I think that's something that we call it illustrative, meaning this is a scenario that could occur, and then you see a lot of these, sort of you've got red buildings and yellow buildings. The red buildings are new, and it's the idea of working with property owners or working with the community and thinking about what if. And I think the more scenarios we do, the better this sort of vision for the future of the village can become. And I think what you see on these maps now is a few iterations of that, but we're hoping that we can continue to refine that and start to then look at, well, similar to the street and how it gets funded, how DOT comes in, on the private sort of side of things, what might be redeveloped? What might redevelop sooner rather than later? What are the hurdles, such as we heard brownfields being potentially one of them? But what are the other hurdles that need to be changed or aligned to make those sites contribute better to accomplishing the long-term vision for the village? I think this is I get really excited. Some people might get terrified, but the idea that the street and the lot that fronts on that have to talk to one another. You can't just put a nice, if you look at some of these images that folks like, a nice storefront, charming little building next to a highway, it just doesn't work. And I think at times, and I've experienced it just personally coming through here, that people are moving really quickly through Gray in their cars. Mm-hmm. So there's this sort of synergy that has to happen between what kind of redevelopment happens and what the street does. And DOT is open-minded to this. They're really, sort of in lockstep with the town now, trying to work through this partnership to do a street design that at a regional level can, sort of satisfy what they need to do with moving cars to the region. And I think this is where we have to come in as a team member to make sure that it accomplishes the local goals here in Gray. And I think that's sort of a big part of the puzzle that the team's going to be working on going forward. And some of these are big ideas, and we oftentimes literally just call them that, but it's important to have some blue sky thinking, like what do you want? What do you dream about in the future? And if we have enough of these conversations, we sometimes sort of hear things that you all have never talked to one another about. And that's where I think we come to this point where really interesting solutions start to emerge. And I'm hopeful that as we start this next round of work, that we can start to refine this work we've done already, but also look for other solutions to some of the problems we're still working through.
Russ, I'm going to interrupt you just for a moment and acknowledge that I neglected to introduce or make sure that Dale had his opportunity to introduce himself. We have Dale Dowdy, who's the Maine Department of Transportation Director of Planning. He's sort of zooming in. So Dale, you want to just acknowledge your presence?
Sure. I'm sorry I couldn't be there tonight, but I'm Dale Dowdy. I'm the Director of Planning, and as Kyle mentioned, we're desiring to be partners here. So interested in hearing what everybody has to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Sorry, I didn't do that earlier, Dale.
We don't have the teams up, so we apologize, Dale. We forgot you were in the room.
So the good news is that your nostrils are not 2 feet high, so that's great.
You can get it with the Dale. There we go.
There he is. There he is.
Anyone else on just Travis? We just realized, anyone else on virtual that would like to introduce themselves?
Yeah, sure. I'm Travis. I'm Ree's son and soon to be owner of Local Centric.
Great, thank you. This is a hybrid world we live in. Sorry about that, guys. Didn't mean to forget about you.
Yeah.
But all right.
So just walking through some of the details here, and I think this is what I'm really excited about, is how do we take this from a vision now to like the nuts and bolts of putting streets together and starting to think about the redevelopment of certain properties. So the first big sort of guiding force here is how do we reclaim the village to center around people? And I think we're seeing this. Gray is not alone in this conversation. This is happening in big cities around New England, all the way down to work out on the western side of the state, up in the down east. It's sort of, because this conversation is something that a lot of similar communities are having. And we oftentimes look backwards when we're thinking about this. Like, we're lucky in New England that we had communities that were based around a walking distance or a short commute to and from the town center for trade reasons. And what we thought was really interesting is the meeting house there, sort of at the center of what I think has evolved into the village. And, we heard a lot of stories about that meeting house being moved. Then there's your monument that was put in place of the meeting house and then moved again. So, you think about some of these traditions we have as humans around how we organize down, main streets and village centers. A lot of those are, pretty timeless. And what we're seeing throughout the country is that these main streets and these village centers are resurrecting those patterns and those traditions, and this is the outside room that is a main street, where you see from building face to building face, and that someone can cross the street and see the eyeballs of the person driving so that they see each other as humans. And, there's sort of a supportive community there that's not just people whipping by at 45, 50 miles an hour. And I think this is sort of, how do we sort of learn from the past to bring us forward? And I think this is also the tension of, the regional demand adjacent to the highway. How do we sort of balance that? And I think it comes down to like thinking through what's reasonable as far as delay or level of service, or the types of metrics that we look at as far as intersection design measured against all these other local goals. With respect to the village. So this is the village today, and we sort of expanded the sort of study area or sort of the map here a little bit, because in conversations with Will and sort of thinking through the infrastructure, sort of stormwater and there's elements of the infrastructure that kind of reach out further than just the kind of geographic center of the village. So when we start to think about this, it's sort of we're trying to tie it all together. And, I think one of the things, if you look at going back to the oldest plan we could find of Gray's Village, it was a meeting place. It was sort of the confluence of all these regional roads. And, I think that's part of like, how do we, there's an opportunity there. You have people passing through, you have commerce happening just by the traffic. And I think that's where we see really productive places that have thriving Main Street businesses and thriving sort of village centers and downtowns have what we call good congestion. It's like bad cholesterol and good cholesterol. It's sort of, they actually have traffic, and it's people either going through or stopping to go shopping or to do some other sort of business. So I think it's recognizing that we actually want to work with that tension around the traffic to actually be a beneficial element to the redevelopment. And I think that's where in the region you have I think a pretty good opportunity to take advantage of that. So we looked, just what is some of the, maybe it's low-hanging fruit or some of the transitional uses that might happen to start to redevelop, and looking at the sort of, if the village center is going to be for the people, how do we sort of rebalance how land use is done? And sort of this sort of looks at a variety of sort of new buildings that might be redeveloped incrementally over time or phased in, so that you actually get a real Main Street, something where buildings are up close to the street. They, sort of share a sidewalk. There's good street trees. There's sort of that classic New England village look and feel. And I think you also have this interesting sort of triangular block in the core of the village that, depending on how and I'm not saying get rid of cars or parking. I think it's just thinking about how it's redistributed in the village so that you have these places that are supportive of community life and public life, and you still have good parking and good services for the buildings as well. So this is one where just thinking about how the parking lots that's on the street side might be turned inside the block and shared with all those businesses, and in the process be able to create a new potential downtown green, where it's the center. So it evolves literally into the 100% corner of where, when you say I'm going to the village center, people need to picture someplace. I mean, that's sort of a question I've asked a lot of people is, well, when you think about going to the village, what's the image in your mind? What's that postcard? You know, if someone comes to Gray and says, oh, I was in Gray for Thanksgiving, what's the postcard they send back to the relatives? And that's sort of an interesting thing to think about. What's the future of your community and what are those postcards that you want to have that you don't right now? And then a big part of that is how do you make a town, and not just a village center, but a town multi-generational? And what we're seeing is as folks are aging, they want to stay in a community. We heard this from folks here in Gray, but they want to downsize or they want to move somewhere where they can have easier time getting around or access to services without driving. So, you know, we heard this a lot from folks here in your community. And sort of the interaction between generations is something that, and you know, you think of those old Rockwell paintings, it's sort of that sort of community between young and old, and that sort of intergenerational bumping into each other that happens just traditionally in a good thriving village that I think we want to bring back into equilibrium. And I think this was sort of the walking school bus, which emerged out of some discussions back in 2022. And then the other piece of this is looking at properties like the Gateway site and seeing how do they fit in and how do those catalyst sites, you know, how can we encourage some redevelopment to happen at a much more at a scale that it you know brings more energy. And this is one where, you know, we sort of looked at this site in a number of different ways. One was, what if it delivers way more housing? You know, how much housing could we fit on that site that may complement the village in a way, and sort of bring in other opportunities for different types of housing. So this is a very dense plan. I'm going to use the D word, where, you know, it could be a lot of housing, you know, in still lower buildings. You know, we're going to avoid the apartment building like we talked about earlier, but could deliver sort of, you know, more housing versus, you know, this plan, which looks at delivering 2 ball fields, you know, sort of that recreational activity. And then what we've also looked at is part of the redevelopment, and this is where it's important to do these hand in hand, is, you know, if done in a coordinated fashion, new lanes or alleys or even side streets could be created. You could see that sort of new street running parallel. And what that does is we can open up shortcuts. We can open up that back street, or, you know, you have a main street and a market street. You know, you have these options so that locals might be able to, well, I'm going to take the shortcut to get through during, you know, peak hour. And that what we find is really healthy villages have sort of a network. They have a gridded network of streets. And what we find also is that in places that are sort of transitioning, like, you know, where they might have been, you know, sort of everyone meets at one point, it's that sort of next level of evolution where, okay, let's knit together a block structure that has a few more intersections so that you actually get those shortcuts and you get those slower moving side streets to happen. And, you know, I think there's been a handful of examples of that around the region where towns have started to do this. And this gets to how we connect out to not just what might be the 100% corner or the main street, a couple blocks of shop fronts, but how do folks from around Gray use the village center? And what's emerging is a really sort of resilient and sort of economically vibrant way to do this is to make sure that you've got services within 15 minutes of your town center. So it might be that, you know, if you know, folks from around the community can come in and out of the village center and access services in a way that they're not driving 45 minutes away to go grocery shopping or go to the, you know, one of those services they might need. So I think as we start to think about the evolution of the village, what are those things that people are traveling great distances to that could be brought in or supplemented in the village or around the village, to start to think about how your community is not just being more resilient, but not leaking retail dollars out to adjacent communities or otherwise. And this gets to the sort of one of the next point here about building up a local economy with intention. I think this is, you know, the buying local or supporting local businesses. You know, a lot of the Main Street organizations we work with are always trying to think about how do we bring in more independent businesses, or how do we support the independent businesses that are here? And what this diagram is trying to show is that not every independent business has to start in a 1,500 square foot storefront, with a monthly nut on the rent they have to cover. And what we've seen is everything from really well choreographed markets to, informal sort of, whether these are a nice looking Airstream retrofitted to sell food out of, or, there's sort of ways to really incubate more businesses in a village that is done in a way that sort of brings more energy to it. And as we've seen these types of projects unfold, oftentimes folks will, if they're really successful in building and bringing quality stuff to the market, they'll eventually end up in a brick and mortar. So I think it's this idea of like, how do you start small, and rather than building a bunch of new buildings, maybe it's just a few food carts in a parking lot right now, and that sort of has a thriving food scene. Or, I think it's that idea of experimentation that can be done at a small increment and for low dollars. And then, building up that local ecosystem. And I think this is where you look at where you are in the region. People are looking for experiences. You have a unique geography here, and I think a unique place in the region that if you had a handful of interesting things come together that augment the things that are already here, then people will come here to spend their dollars rather than going someplace else. And I think that's sort of the economic strategy that a lot of people are using. And this sort of gets to, well, it's not all about just spending money. It's about what are you actually spending your time doing? And I think that's the best kind of village center, is you just go there to watch people. You sort of spend time in that environment. And I think your fellow, citizens here in Gray recognize this and thought, how do we actually use the village center as not just a trailhead, but sort of a way of connecting to these other destinations or activities, whether this is just intentionally walking for recreation, or if it's really connecting bicycle infrastructure that are farther afield. So I think there's some early sort of thoughts about how we can reach out and start to improve these priority connections. And it's interesting because when we talk to folks, it's sort of, in a normal sort of highly functioning village where, everyone's sort of behaving, and we can name some names if people are interested in this, you can go visit them, but someone might walk 5 or 10 minutes to just, get a carton of eggs. And, I think it's really interesting to say someone who lives only a 5 or 10 minute walk away might think, oh, I don't live in the village. And it was funny, we were talking to another community once, and the wife said, oh yeah, we definitely live in the village center. And the husband lived in the same house. Oh no, we're not in the village center. So it's really this idea that if part of it is the streetscape design and how we can, someone who might live a 10-minute walk away might hop in their car to go down to Cumberland Farms now. But if we do this right, that person might choose to walk or ride their bike or go through the back trail through the woods. Like, how can we bring folks who are already local out of their cars and have a more enjoyable, more convenient way of using the assets and the destinations here in the village center? And this has happened in other places. So it's not, sort of one of those things that it's not only good because it allows choice for folks who might have limited mobility means, but it also helps to create a more active kind of lifestyle here. And it sort of ends up being a way to bump into your neighbors, and generally, it ends up creating a more fun place to live and run your business. So this all comes down to vision, because I think, there's a lot of really complex sort of back and forth on how we get this to work, working with not just, we talked about stormwater, we talked about the traffic, the regional tensions, what do we do about adding sidewalks and right away? There's a lot of details we're gonna have to work through over the next coming months. And I think what's important is understanding, are we on the right vision? When we look long range, is this where we're heading? And some of these sketches were meant to sort of illustrate that, where, right now you look at this intersection and we sort of say, okay, what is one way we can utilize that same amount of land to do more things with? Rather than just move cars through, what else can this land do? And, this is not just tightening up intersections or tightening up turns, but it's sort of thinking about, how someone's gonna cross that intersection on foot, how that sort of place, that outdoor room is shaped. So that's, these were sort of conceptual intersection designs that we're gonna continue to work on with DOT and sort of run through their models. And then the idea that, if you have a valuable public realm that people like to spend time in and feel safe walking around in, then the adjacent real estate starts to think about their location differently. And, some of these are, the gas station, is seen as being redeveloped. But we've even seen at times that gas stations might redevelop and do what's called a gas backwards, where they put the pumps behind, they put the store at the corner, and sometimes they put offices above the store. So there's this idea that it might not be that we're changing the uses that are already there, but it's just, it ends up that you can do more things with your land and make it more productive and have it redeveloped with the same uses still being there. So I think there's a lot of additional scenarios that we should be continuing to think about as we look at how this DOT project and the redesign of the streets can also inform what the land adjacent to them do. And you can see here how that might, be redeveloped. And I think what we want to be able to do is be able to come back to you and say, well, what are the scenarios that might allow you to get to some of these redevelopments outcomes more quickly, and what do we do or not do with the street safe design to make that possible. And this one is an interesting one because we had a lot of debate about where was the right of way on that part of the street, but when we started to look at it in more detail, and I think this is sort of the evolution of a lot of these streets in New England is how do we make this work for everyone? And these used to be on-paved squares, where everyone just come into the center, slow down. And now it's sort of, okay, well, how do we kind of channelize it? How do we tighten up the curves so someone can cross very easily? How do we allow for vehicles to have visual contact with all the other people using the street? And then I think it's like, how can adjacent land uses start to redevelop to be perhaps multi-story, perhaps mixed use, pulled up to that sidewalk so that it creates that kind of iconic village main street. And then how do these transition over time? And I think this was a quick sketch that culminated in how you could see the evolution of the square of all these buildings coming together to create a real main street, and how that might be done phased over time. But really it starts with, you don't want to just pull up a building to the front of the street and have those cars flying by. You kind of, it's sort of a kit of parts that we have to assemble. And I think that's part of the puzzle is, with the timeline of the highway project and DOT's project, and then sort of what can be done locally so that all that comes together in concert. And I think part of it is like the street itself is a big part of it. Just this sketch is just showing having some street parking, having a street canopy, that has trees, which not only is more beautiful to look at, but it also cools the sidewalks, makes it more comfortable to walk. It sort of plays around with the cone of vision of people's eyes while they're driving, so they actually subconsciously want to slow down because they're kind of more contained. And then this has an elevated crosswalk where we're sort of saying, no, let's really signal to vehicles that this is a place where you should be on the lookout for others. And that might, just doing that alone might be a good step forward. And then how the surrounding properties react and contribute in their own way to finishing that main street. This is looking down Brown here, which we have had a lot of discussion about. We can look at the maps a little bit more about, do you close it? Do you turn it one way? Do you discourage through traffic? There's all sorts of things that we've kind of teased through around that particular side street or sort of cut through. But I think going back to looking at how good village centers behave historically, and all the examples, it's how do we create lots of opportunity and for shortcuts, for more intersections, for the side streets, for and then make them behave in a way that supports walking and biking. And I think where Brown comes through, and you know, I think we heard this from a lot of community members and looked at a couple different ways, but it's really this idea that coming down the hill and sort of that channelization that people have to kind of just keep on rolling through. If we just simply kind of make it a more intentional right-hand turn, that might discourage a lot of folks to just cruise through there and really start to give a little bit more hierarchy. So this is sort of one of those things we'd love for folks to continue to think about, because this would start to favor Yarmouth as kind of the vehicular corner. And it might actually, I think, start to relieve some of, provide more opportunities at the Brown intersection, where that comes in. And you have these two intersections, and, I don't want to give up on one of them, but one might be more auto oriented and more heavier traffic than the other. And I think that's one of the questions that I want to keep kind of asking the team as we move forward. And I think you have this great kind of civic art, you're coming in at this, lovely looking building, and to kind of be able to celebrate that with a small pocket park and a proper lawn. And, so when people are coming down the hill, like, oh, I'm in the village now. And there's these gateway moments that are to a certain degree missing now in Gray that we could put back in and kind of rediscover. And not that you have to move your monument back to another location, but like this is a location for a new monument perhaps. But this idea that they have these sort of pieces of civic art in these places. Yeah, and then this sort of on the other end, another sort of opportunity for how to think about indicating that you're coming from, a rural sort of out of town road where you might be going 40, 50 miles an hour to, oh, I'm hitting the village where street trees pop up in a much more regularized way. The intersections become a little tighter. And this could be another gateway moment that also kind of encourages that redevelopment of the Catalyst site. So I know that was a lot, but I wanted to try and get through that as quickly as possible, because I really would, I think we want to hear from you the rest of this evening. So I think there's two activities we're going to ask for everyone. I think we'll break up. We have enough people in the room that we could probably break up into three sort of tables. So I'm going to invite some folks to come to this end of the table, some folks to go to that end of the table, and then some folks to utilize the wall. So, and then there's two activities. The first one, some folks have already done, but I encourage you to continue to add if you haven't, or if you want a few more dots and want to do it again, please go ahead. But really the question there is, in looking at those photos, what might you think, which photos represent a potential, and it could be the windows on the building, or it could be the whole building, or it could be the whole photo, but what could represents the future of the village here in Gray? And what doesn't? What do you not want to see? That's kind of the visual preference. And then the second activity is really thinking about looking at these maps, both the existing, what are things that we need to improve on the existing site plan, or that we should make sure remain, that are we want to make sure stay and aren't gotten rid of. And then I think on some of the proposed ones, these illustratives that we've shown, what did we get right and what did we not get right yet? And I think this is a real open critique of the work we've done. So please don't pull your punches. If there's something you don't like, I want to hear about it. And then we'll sort of, I think, do a wrap up here with the time we've got left on what everyone talked about. Does that sound good? Great. Yep. All right. So you want to talk?
I want you to finish and then I want to.
Well, okay. So before we break up into these groups, and Sarah, Vanessa, can you figure out time for just how long we should give everyone? Yeah, so let's just do this. Can you go 1, 2, 3? So you see 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, coming. We're good.
2, 3. You say 3. 1,
They're gonna
2,
separate
3. 1, 2, 3.
No, we're 1, 2, 3.
Did everyone remember their number?
Yeah, see.
Oh, yeah.
All right,
Pay attention.
one should go here, 2 should go there, and 3 should go over the wall.
Where are my two stones? Sorry.
2 can go out this end of the.
Can we ask
Hi, guys. Somebody really. Everybody wanted.
You know.
Yeah, we've got a question for you here.
When he starts that.
Thank you.
All right, so you're one. All right, right here, I'll stick with you.
Yeah, throw a sticker on the. Yeah.
You're 1, so you're, oh, great, let's,
Most of them went over there.
so, yes, so let me go back to the instructions here, because we're.
Went through it. So, looking at this, I think that's no part. I think it's supposed to get.
So,
It's gonna go first.
why don't I go right here, I'll come over there.
One's over here.
Like, this is it. It's like, but there's already a whole design. And right now, the sidewalk is on one side. See this, you know, just right there. That's. I think that's it. Yeah.
Draw right.
Is it already?
Look like it's too much. How we can.
Freedom of market.
Much time. No, I know, but I mean. Oh, yeah. Rearranging some stuff?
Yeah. One of my
Yeah.
favorite things lately is,
Yeah.
where are we?
All right, so
Freedom, red, pen out.
there's 2 ways we can do this, and I encourage both. What are the areas of the center that we don't like now and need improvement? And that is a red dot, or you can work rate matches right there.
That's.
The positive house and all.
Yeah, and if there's something that you like, or you think should happen, that's a green marker, green dot.
In order for.
And then the key thing we're really interested in is
The red is like.
what's, you're thinking about streets, what's, where the streets should be improved, sidewalks added.
That's just like what could happen.
All these plans,
And
where's our?
it's certainly over a 20 to 30 year period.
Love it.
It's
Love these
nothing
buildings,
that's gonna happen
parking.
year.
So how much parking do you think there needs to be?
You have a hard time parking now anywhere in Gray. So, I mean, it's, you know, that right now, I know Joe's is parking in one Gray Center. McDonald's is parking in one Gray Center. The church is pretty well, no parking all day long.
Try to sneak in there.
Yeah. So I mean, I think parking is a big issue. if you're gonna-
Even have enough parking because of the.
All these brown buildings.
Propose it could fit in.
Yeah, yeah.
Jacob Road gonna be moved? Moved.
Yeah, what, this, in this idea,
No, this
It would
was
be
there,
moved.
I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what you moved. But there's no way that this building would fit next to the, what is that?
Person is house.
This is Donuts is right.
yeah.
It's over Mom's. I think Mom's is here now.
That's, this is all vacant land.
Oh, it is all vacant?
That's a park. That's huge.
Monument's gone.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
where it
everything
is.
kind of slides over.
I know where it is, but I just, this, what I said, there were the dimensions, but there's not enough land there.
No, right now there is. If you go out there today, the street comes like this.
Because I think.
This slides the street over to really be.
Yeah, there it is, yeah.
One thing I just wanted to tell you, I like the ideas with the cutting. Is the McDonald's gonna stay? Is the McDonald's gonna
Well,
stay?
there were some scenarios back in 2022 that we looked at of this being redeveloped as well. And there's likely, but you don't know what the short term and midterm, it's likely to stay.
Because the way, I'm like a very, not just the big ones, I don't.
No, just in the meeting. But they don't. Right. No, but
right now, they're not.
Well, that too, yeah. You think you're this is where I think I
It's gonna be a lot of pavement.
when I'm looking at that, I'm going.
Saying, my greenery, I think it's wiped out. I would say that personal greenery that I think is down the great, public use, that.
I like Sheila Bennett.
Yeah.
There's a little thing to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, he's all right, but.
Yeah.
So I think,
Yeah, Tim,
I think this, you're bringing up a good point. There's gonna drop.
Yeah, there's so much trusting. I feel like, oh, yeah, really, I think this franchise. You told me to sleep.
Slow down.
You know, I made a decision now, and I wouldn't recommend it here.
Okay.
You run 4 block, it's down.
I actually came down around.
Right.
Yeah.
I was-
It's all.
And
really, there's no bad.
That's really right.
But they combine in it.
So-
45, 55.
That was the other part. I think-
saying, I mean, you got, let's say this builds up. Between the building and parking, there's very few greenery spots other than what you've got here.
So one of the things I want to make sure you're thinking about though, is that we're seeing a lot of these redevelopments, and our offices built a few ourselves. Is that
Yeah,
There's
those have
three-
been redeveloped up through here, yeah.
like, one way it is that there's retail here that might be 30 or 40 feet deep, and then there might be parking behind that are on the
It's
first
like
floor.
something like up to Casco, Bridge Street.
Yeah, it's one of those buildings that we're seeing getting built a lot that provides, you know, the alley in the back. I think it's like finding a happy balance of how do you get everything on the street side? and- I think that's this next cross border plan that's gonna be going in and saying, zooming in on some of these and saying, we actually. What's going on? That's part of, that's gonna be.
Find my other issue is turning radius. Now that they've shut down 26, I know 3 guys have been pulled over already because one of them
Doing which move?
right in here.
This turn?
This turn, because one of them's a building mover with his beams aligned. He's taking up 2 lanes, then he has to come into oncoming traffic and make this turn. He got pulled over by the cops. Huh?
He stopped here to back up and like.
Yeah, he couldn't make the turn. He got pulled over. He came down, so he come down 26 and make that swing because there's 2 lanes and come straight. But coming up here, he has to go into 2 lanes, 3 lanes, come into the oncoming traffic.
But we've been starting to do auto turns, like having that at the beginning, and we've been nudging that over and over and over to make that turn.
Because that's, I'm in the estimation. Second turn, that's.
Yeah, no,
Legally, I get somebody to come around, it's my responsibility.
So one of the thoughts that have come up, and you're enjoying all the new roads, so is there a new, so like, what's kind of,
Connection.
they go down center and then they connect.
And then we could go
Are you talking back here?
This needs to be a
I don't know where the right, if there's a new road that connects Portland and center, I don't know where it is.
I just got a post office here.
It's so busy now.
Yeah.
There's road
And
closed, there's.
then we can get MTA to put a tourist site right there on the end of that, on the end of that
Get
road.
brownfield on that side.
Is that brownfield?
That's pretty strong, but you want. That's storage and stuff.
Big, big
The state can't all this.
coming through the center of Gray. You don't know? Because there's a toll booth in New Boston. Well, no, I know. I know that. What I'm saying is because what? She's not talking to me. Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing, look, I think there's a few different tactics around this. One is tractor trailers.
There are big trailers.
There is some routes that might have to be used, which we have to deal with. But then there are some who are just choosing to go through because it's easier. If, and that's the sort of balancing act on the design is,
I think you're gonna find it,
if it's hard, they'll choose to go through.
you're gonna back down. Those are trucks, they come down here and if they have to go.
So now we're shoving them right back to the entire village to get out to one. So we'd have to cut this one off right here.
I live in.
Yeah, they're gonna run that one.
I mean, the weight is going to be shading one thing, but it is not because no plow truck.
They're free wheel. And they're gonna go to Lewiston.
That's what I.
And I was actually doing that, and it's just like.
Yeah.
I just.
The idea was
Ending up like 5 years down. Instead of being
They keep developing.
What-
It's just part of
why didn't-
the gully.
Why, because he just said why the guy can't get that, is because now they're coming, they're coming through because they're trying to. They're trying to. If you go north, you're going south, you got a giant expensive.
They don't go. That's.
Right, and get off in Auburn, either way.
Just pay the $14 or whatever.
25, $30 when you got one axle.
Yeah.
Huge. So, yeah, everybody gets off, and then they drive down Route 100 like at 65 miles an hour, and it's in the building shape.
So this is a crazy idea that you just thought of. Why doesn't Gray have congestion pricing?
They're doing a lot right now.
Congestion price.
Basically flag the pool for the.
I know, they.
It's like New York City now.
How do you not?
Everyone has to
They're doing that.
respond.
I mean, you could always.
I totally suggest that.
Well, I.
I'm like.
No, we're,
I just think they would not allow us to do
I
that.
think that's.
it's a, yeah, is it?
Yeah, but-
You're talking to the DOT, telling me.
No, that, you know, or it wouldn't have to be a toll booth, it just have to be like a series,
They get a free.
just a series of.
Grandfather, your truck should be there.
Okay.
Yeah, but if they've been driving.
You know it's not really.
Power back on or?
Yeah.
It's a crazy idea. I think
I know.
Without stealing somebody's money.
I've heard that before. Life acted, I've heard it the other way, oh, it doesn't work. So
We are.
I think it's just looking at how do we.
There's actually quite a bit of driving by.
Could have some sort of.
This is.
With all of these plans to bring more traffic. The center of, they're gonna come in cars, even if they have someplace. to park, they're gonna come in their cars. And
That's why it's not very much.
in the summertime, like that, just for me to get, that whole bypass. Back to
Yeah, I've seen that. I have seen that.
Yeah, back up Friday night, Friday night's back up.
Yeah, I mean, I see it coming in. Too.
You're back 2.5 miles back on, on Friday afternoon.
What's interesting about this is up in Conway, they did the same type of thing.
The road suggested moving it.
Yeah, it's sort of, yeah. Yeah.
He's
Yeah,
back.
I mean, the other idea is, like, it's a series of sort of,
It'd be pretty
you know,
quick.
Side streets.
By doing the network of
yeah.
parking in behind, really for the ability to then have no parking or less parking on yeah.
Oh, no, no, no.
They don't- like different.
Where you can sit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's way out, right?
Right.
But the other thing is you gotta realize, the turnpike bought a section,
Yes,
right,
that's
moved
sort
a
of
section
trade
right
off
over
to
here, so.
make it
So if
easier
they
to.
can do something here to get people coming down.
Well, people are already got.
Well, so I heard that a couple years ago too. People are making that move.
Turnpike bought that.
Things we talked about.
Turnpike bought this since, Pastor Gary. So if they. Trying to
Because the
figure
parking
out.
lot.
Well, the road this way, then that would take. MTA bought that.
Really?
So when I see
If they
something,
can do something
you
here.
know, I recognize the tax value. because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not just
the first time I heard that.
Yeah, but.
a small building.
Yeah, another ability. Yeah, I mean, this is such a weird.
Right now, we've done all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's pretty upset. Sometimes they could do a.
Right now, we're just we stop at that.
So why couldn't you have a spur right over here
Yeah.
that connects to there?
Yeah, like, why not rethink? I mean, the fact that you don't need all this queuing. Why not?
And then you eliminate this whole issue of truck filters.
Well, I mean, it's sort of, this sort of whole queuing thing.
A lot of us guys come out and we get out with great plans. So we have to come up with.
So they
Yeah, you have to, yeah.
Even if you have a utility, you come back and do it. We're not forcing you, we're not swing, and that tight corner, you know. Big vehicle, trailer truck, you can come in. Even if it's a truck, doesn't come in from the way, they can cross through here and back down off the turnpike. They don't come up the road. Either way.
So DOT did some counts to understand where's the phenomenon. Where's the truck traffic? There's-
We have a lot coming out before.
I don't hate it. I see it. I did.
Say we could figure out how they could get through, they have to go a little slower. What?
Do that.
Yeah.
Well, even the tractor trailers, they still
And when they come up here, there's a yield sign, but they don't, if they're coming this way, going down, West Grand, they sometimes they don't yield, and then they put on the brakes, and all the buildings that way.
Each of them.
And after this, you have West Rocket.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, but
Up here, you go 26. Then you can go down. Some of that.
yeah, no, that's not a bad idea.
Everybody coming up, they go, they come to you.
What is this? That goes to.
Yeah.
Season's doing that.
This is the road.
It's the same idea. Yes. Like the thought on that was that, you know, these are really big, like old farm lots. Restriction rooms, and then that becomes your frontage in a new building. It's the same idea there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm big on recreation. This town doesn't have recreation.
Yeah, I've heard things that these fields are not.
Right now, we've got a great.
So these, you know.
Douglas Field is not.
Yeah, that's the.
Oh, protecting the great. Making a reason for it. They've not protected it. Until here, they didn't have a little bit of play. And my kids go soccer and everything's there.
So I think this is the.
You mean, why didn't we draw on that?
You're gonna spend. It's the town is ready. Every building permit, the town is ready to pay $375 for 360. I've been paying. People have been building.
These ones on the street. This, here's the version.
15 years ago, it was $60,000.
Yeah, I mean, every plan we've worked on says, oh, we've got to figure out.
And then there's
The latest.
I'm sorry, what?
there's a municipal law here, so there's.
I think that was what we got.
Oh, yeah.
I will say this, because I'm here, right?
Yeah.
Since they opened this up, I'm surprised how many people said it's a open.
Oh, really?
It's actually a lot of people.
We've been puzzling over that.
So that-
You know, the future, is that a good walking path? Is that a good side lane?
Yeah, I mean, on the next day when it's on sale,
It doesn't go.
I'll sit there and
It's sad.
It's actually.
Listen,
If you were to develop this with a walking path with stations, whether they're informational or exercise type stuff, I think that
the thought too is that it would kind of sneak by the town hall.
for years, I didn't even know this was here. And this is right across from my property. It is a lousy place to have people come. I mean.
No, because that's exactly.
Now you gotta slow
Same thing with here. It's
Yeah.
another one that's kind of.
Make straight, then you do this.
How much traffic is
Really.
that gonna add?
So with this.
I haven't looked at their.
It's taking. Aligning.
I'd like to know.
Is
that a
trail? An alignment.
That's a smart move. This is kind of dead end.
Oh, there.
And
You
then
know, why
this
not connect?
is not entirely, not.
I know about the spot.
It's actually.
Yeah, 'cause they're trying to-
Yeah, because they're walking over.
There you go. Right, Ted Glenn, that was the first leg.
How much?
Oh, that's right.
Second leg, and this is the third.
We're at Bertrand right now.
Yeah.
But why would they do that?
Well, that's private building.
That block.
And I'm not.
Wonderful trails being back there.
It's the same. Lots of homes.
And then there's a safety factor here.
It goes right around.
No, but everything's a really big block to the.
Yeah, I have not.
But it's already there and they've done a lot of it.
How are the stores doing?
Yeah.
Well, this is, to me, it is a problem because the weed that they're growing in here has made going into the hardware store. There's a bunch of people that go in the hardware stores.
Big snakes. Yeah, I don't think that's right. Yeah.
Coming in.
I use this section in that culture.
Brown Street.
Yeah.
Something that has a place where you can actually show, I get my hair cut here, cut your hair, I can get my hair cut. All those.
Either way, that's not.
I've not been in.
Speed bumps.
Yeah.
That is a speed bump. Speed bumps get. For everybody to make
This is a huge negative. Other worse would be
A lot of these centers, vacancies are increasing, and a lot of them are starting to think about how do I redevelop, vertical housing. And change the way I get that money.
These are work, I mean.
So that kind of retailing.
Yeah.
The wetlands down in here.
Thanks for showing here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get it.
I think, it's called.
Great gravel.
These are banks. These are trees, I'm adding trees because of this.
What about over here, the direction coming in? We haven't talked about this side of it.
One half of
Pretty awful, but I used to live right by a train track and there's.
been there for years.
I know. I just
Mango trees, trees are nice. You got your wellhead sitting over here.
Let's just do a 2-minute warning before we report out. So if you want Vanessa, do you want to consolidate?
This property. You here tonight?
My concern with these is the amount of traffic that comes and makes this, which is most of the time just a right-hand turn there, right? And then they keep going onto the turnpike. If you do this, I think you're gonna start running into traffic.
So we. And I think that sort of.
Having said that, I agree to the danger of this the way it is, that people don't yield the yield sign.
The new.
We've got 1 minute break. Sarah, can you speak it all right? Can report out.
Yeah.
And I think Vanessa. Someone who will report out.
Could come maybe back over here.
Question.
All right, so everyone's very excited about their discussions, I can tell, so I don't really want to stop them, but I also want to respect everyone's evening, so. Yeah, so knowing we're already at 7:30, I think it's important that we kind of come back together, and I'm gonna ask one, maybe two people from each group to kind of give us a little 2 or 3 minute summary of what you talked about. High points, low points, things we definitely have to pay attention to. And then I think we'll maybe kind of wrap up with next steps, but if folks want to hang out a little bit more, I'm sure a few of us are more than willing to keep talking. So I'm gonna have our group go first, because I know they're gonna do a fabulous job setting an example. Yes. Yes, you do. Stand.
I don't know what to say.
Come on, Rachel.
Okay, what do you want to know?
Well, why don't you summarize the three big
Okay.
big takeaways that are good and three big sort of issues we got to address? That's 6 things.
Brad, tell me the issues.
Well, issue number one is traffic.
Traffic's the issue.
You know, we can't, being in the excavation business and talking to guys that are trucking every day, they have a tremendous hard time getting in and out of Gray. And I just mentioned that MDOT bought the old Bossy property over on Portland Road. And maybe they could do a crossover road to take some of the traffic coming up Portland Road, back over to West Gray Road and down the bypass and out to relieve some of the congestion coming up into Gray Common. It's not bad during the day, but 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there's times, if they shut the turnpike down, there's times that they just come down Portland Road, you can't get out, so.
And I like that. 'cause
Just
it's
an
not gonna-
idea that,
It's not gonna compete
I'm
with
pretty
more traffic.
sure, Doug might know for sure, if the MDOT bought that Bossy property.
MTA did.
So something like that, if you could do a cutoff road there, would take a little bit of the traffic coming into Gray Corner, would free that up a little bit, so you could get maybe some heavier traffic and then bypass some of the car traffic coming up through. My other question, or my concern was on Brown Street. If we take too much traffic off Brown Street, when you turn right, if you're coming down, you gotta go to Lewiston, you turn right, and the lights hit just right, you're gonna get about 6 cars parked there before you can move. So everything back there is gonna back up beyond that intersection.
All the way to Depot.
Well, pretty close. I live in West Craig. We'll get up and Lenny probably can, some mornings, it's backed up to the old Good Shepherd's Church. A lot of times it's back to Ramsey Road, so we have at least 10 minutes or better we have to wait to get back into Gray Corner. So, I mean, if we can just get some traffic, I like the idea of parking most of the commercial stuff in the back of the buildings rather than the front, so that you can do a little greenery in the front, pull that road out, give you a little bit more space, because you're gonna need it. I don't know what the easements are on Main Street, but to try to widen that, I don't think, you're still looking at 3 lanes. I don't think you can widen that to 3 lanes up. It'd be nice if you could widen that to 3 lanes up beyond to Colley Hill. That would give you a turn lane especially into the town office or whatever. And also, I'm a big proponent of ball fields. I have coached, I have kids that are coaching. In this day and age, we have to take our kids to New Gloucester and pay to play in New Gloucester, to play on the field. So my sons, my daughters have to take my grandkids to up on New Gloucester 3 to 4 days a week to do all the, we can't get on the high school fields. The high school doesn't allow us to do that. So I'm a big proponent, rather than housing, to see a little bit more green space, especially right with the school. So there'll be parking at the school that you could walk over to the ball fields also. I hate to see Gray expanded. I know it will be. I hate to see it in my lifetime, but I know at some point it's gonna have to be, and I'm willing to work with anybody or make suggestions, but that's kind of what and the only other concern I had is I see a lot of buildings there, which I know would be built out over time, but you need parking, and with those buildings, parking's asphalt. So you gotta look at maybe.
Some
maybe a
people
little bit-
park in there. We got precedent.
So, yeah, you still got your spot. So other than that, anybody else can speak from the group?
We did a couple of roads, connecting Portland Road and Hancock Street to give the locals a little bit of a passage. We thought if we were gonna do any kind of ring road, we could do it, we could connect Center Road through the post office to Portland Road, and then connect the back of the Gray Plaza with the old interurban, and then the interurban on through past Pennell in the backyard there to Main Street. And that's just for the locals to just have a flow. I know ring road's not a popular word in Gray, but the cemetery keeps it from being a full ring. It's like a shoe on.
I'm a little concerned about Hancock.
I know, everyone, it's just ideas.
No, I know, but I'm just gonna say why.
Okay.
Right now, it is, you cannot believe the traffic on this just to come here. And to the Meadow View, and now there'll be the extension. So I don't know what the count is in there, and they're not going childproof speeds right now. So that's it. That's the only caution. I love.
Horseshoe.
But that one, I think we gotta be careful because everybody's so close to the road right now.
Yeah.
Great. All right, well, thank you, group one.
Yeah, good job.
I just add on one thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just one thing, and since I'm at Sawyer House here, the speed at which cars come into town here is incredible.
I think it's speed all around. It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
It's
crazy.
absolutely
That's a good point.
I'm like a painter when I come in that way.
Yeah, so.
Group two, do you want to go? Any questions for our group, or do we want to let group two go? You have your hand up?
Yeah, it flows on what you said. The town needs to budget a police officer, maybe you share with our town, to give out speeding tickets, because if you don't do that, you are not gonna slow down.
Yeah.
You're not gonna speed in your own. Yes.
Yeah.
Speed
Yeah,
in
the
your
speed
own,
traffic.
little
Yeah.
leaky
Yeah.
side. But gray,
Place where you get your feet on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah.
I got all the slogans, Susie.
Great. All right, who would like to kind of give a summary for group 2 here? Jump. that
I
one.
can start, maybe somebody can finish. I mean, my concern is that when you create some of the green space, it takes away some parking in certain areas. So I'm concerned about that and making sure that the businesses still have parking.
Thoughts from group 2?
We had a few other things on here. There was definitely parking written 4 times. So that was important here. We really liked the cut through, but there was a little bit of a movement due to, I don't know what these buildings are that you mentioned.
And their other.
So it was just a little bit of a movement for that. And then I kind of mentioned more sidewalks. I know we're extending Yarmouth Road a little bit, but this road is where they just shoot down, starting at this road all the way down 45 at least.
Kill people, just say it.
And yeah, there's been 2 dead since I moved in on this road. We'd like no more. You.
Any other comments from group 2?
Parking.
Parking, we got noted.
It really is everywhere.
All right, thank you, group 2. Group 3, who's on the wall, who wants to kind of give any new things that haven't been said already that you want to add?
So Andy had some good points about having smaller businesses that are being destinations. I don't even remember the Loving Spoonful. It's kind of redeveloping that way. Get a bed and breakfast. He also talked about the fact that people start developing, it becomes contagious. So he does landscaping, so he gets his property looking good. The next person's gonna do it, but they have to have that motivational factor to do that. That's a good point. Parking was a big issue. They talked about still buildings here. Adam Wilkinson talked about coming in through here off Shaker doing the semi-ring road here. That was a good idea. That was good. But parking was a big issue overall, and then I think we're pretty much on point. Destinations. But again, that's a lot of development. And a lot at one point in time, they talked about doing multi-use. That's, I think, actually now zoned in the village, so you could have density above and then businesses below, and that actually might combine the parking aspect as well. And get a preservation of space. But we used to call it pink zoning, using back the zoning, but you basically have 4 forces in play. You have the physical, the economic, governmental, and social, so the topology of this coming together. It's all gonna sync together. That's the problem with all of this. I've seen a lot of iterations of this. It's a lot like the same stuff made in 2012 and one in 84. Same concept, same issue going on. Great ideas. Implementing them is always going to be the issue, but these are the same things that kind of going on. But you know, getting different access points, what Brad brought up was good. But all good points Tony had was good. All obvious concerns.
Great.
I think that the destinations, I think, was a real big theme, and it looks like there's quite a bit of land, which there is between like Hancock and Portland, and obviously there's a big gully. If everyone's ever been out behind the library here, there's a pretty big gully there. But there might be some opportunities in that area, again, between Hancock and Portland to create multiple destinations.
Right.
Yeah, just think overall, I find it great that something's happening. And it would be sad if we wouldn't take the opportunity to turn this into something. Because Gray has actually so much to offer, but it's not seen. It's not visible. So what people do is driving through Gray. They don't stop because there's no reason. I mean, sure, you stop to go to Hanover or to gas up your car. And it's not about, I'm not someone, I'm old fashioned. So we don't need a new Portland here, where like hundreds of thousands of people come and park and eat and dance and whatever. But I think we need to do something that is a good, healthy mix for everybody who's living in Gray. And for some business, like for people stop, because it's right in the center of it all, right at the turnpike, and it's not used. That's, yeah, I think that's what I want.
15 minutes from everything.
Yeah, you're right in the center, but you're not doing anything in the center. It's that, you could, it's just, it's breaking apart. But we could actually use it and turn it into something that everybody who lives here can enjoy and use, and everybody else might be driving by and actually say, well, this is cute. Have a break here. And then go on.
Kind of like Cornish.
Yeah.
Cute little town, they have stuff through.
Yeah.
That was well said. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone spending, quite a bit of the evening here with us. So Ann, do you want to talk about next steps, or, because I think we'll be in touch, so definitely, whether it's Ann or someone from our team, so keep an eye on your inbox for next steps. We'll likely have a series of meetings happening throughout the spring and into the summer. And then the DOT, sort of working with them, will have probably more focused conversations around the actual street design as well. So I would encourage everyone to go out and take a walk and kind of revisit this conversation, and, make sure if you've got good ideas, we're very accessible. There's a website that's up. We'll be monitoring email, and we'll send around the notes and video from this so people can share it with their friends. So.
Right, so if you haven't signed in, please do. I don't know what happened to the sign in, right there, yeah. Give us an email so we can be in touch with you. There is a new website that will be rolling out any day now, that has what's called kind of a story map. It's a fancy word for just some, really sort of built on the remarks that Russ made earlier. And we'll be updating, that's where we'll be updating everybody about what's happening in the village design, the VTP, the Village Transformation Project. So this is not your last bite at the apple. We do want more input from you, and we'll be sharing with you, the next iteration of plans. And so if you have any, questions, feel free to contact me anytime you want. My name is Ann Gass again, and I'm on the website. I'm a council member. We have Doug Webster, the director of our planning department, and feel free to reach out to us and to the principal group as well. We'd love to hear from you, good, bad, or ugly. We want to hear from you. It's great. I haven't seen this many business owners and commercial property owners in a room together. I think in the 35 years I've been in Gray, so it's really exciting to have you all here tonight. Really appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Sandwiches out there.
Yeah.
You look.
Nice to meet you.
You doing good?
Yeah, going great, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, so.
Nice to meet you. Down the road, 75 yards.
Right. There, that's my.
Flower boxes.
And I go there, my number.
Yeah.
I feel like. You guys been there just a few years, right?
Picture of years, and I'm a lot better. For living here, that. Because like.